Hope everybody is doing well on this particular day. That's right. It is almost the end of March. Hard to believe it, but we've already gone 3 months into the year of 2023. And definitely a lot of folks are paying attention to their health, paying attention to what's going on around the world, and trying to live their best life the best way that they can. And we do know that that is a conversation that a lot of folks go through on a regular basis. And it is one that we are definitely looking forward to having a conversation with our latest guests about, and all in that space. So I do know that there are some people that are trying to figure out where their next big dollar is coming from, or maybe even their next small dollar, because a lot of times folks are just trying to survive any way that they can survive, whether they're living in North Carolina as I am, or whether they're living in that part of Europe that our guest is living at, or whether they're living in India or a number of other parts of the world. And of course, there are folks that are trying to figure out where their next meal is coming from, and where a number of other things are coming from as well. And of course, with the pandemic, and hopefully we are in the waning days of that, even though there are still folks that are getting sick with the virus on a regular basis, we do know that health is a very important also. So a lot of people are paying attention to their health and trying to find ways that they can live the most healthy life as possible. And of course, we do know folks are trying to find ways to make that dollar. Some are getting side gigs, and some are even trying to bet on sporting events. I know a lot of folks were over there paying attention to the Final Four, both in the women's Final Four as well as the men's Final Four, and that will be taking place starting this coming weekend. The women will be Friday and Sunday, and the men will be Saturday, and that traditional championship game on Monday, usually the first Monday in April. And some folks were running over there, and there was even questions around productivity, because some folks were doing those brackets. And if you had this Final Four, I need to know what your secret is, and all in that space, because I don't think anybody saw any of these four teams, even though maybe Connecticut might have been one that folks might have had on their radar, but definitely not Florida Atlantic University and San Diego State, and a number of others that have made it in that space. And of course, folks are paying attention to what is going on politically, everything from the war over there in Ukraine to the rising amount of candidates that are saying that they might be possibly running or not running, and all in that space here in the United States. And there are some folks that are speculating that it could be a rematch of the last presidential election. And there are some folks that are possibly glad about that, and there are other folks that are going like, no, we don't need that. A rematch of those that are in the older age range, since I think both of those gentlemen are in their 80s, if I'm remembering correctly, and all in that space. Not saying that we can't have leaders that are of a different age. I mean, I just hit the big 60 last year, and I still consider myself a leader as well, even though they're in July, it'll be the big 6-1, and all in that space, and still trying to find that queen in the life as well. So even at 61, you can still have hope. And who knows, maybe that person will come around and be somebody that is younger, or maybe it'll be somebody in the same age range, but maybe that is the person that I will grow old with. And maybe there'll be somebody from this area, or maybe there'll be somebody that is international. Only time and the fates will play that out. But I'm going to bring in my guest, and I brought up a lot of these things because I know she dealt with a lot of the things that I was referring to, including living your best life, as well as traumas, as well as dealing with burnout. And we do know that burnout can be very real. I know that a lot of folks were glad that they were able to work from home, and definitely we are seeing a lot of folks that are still working remotely from home. We're also seeing a lot of folks that are doing the hybrid job as well, where they're spending part of it in the office and part of it on the computer, telecommuting, and doing things along those lines. So I'm going to learn more about Ola and Ola Bunmi, and some of the things that she was involved in, and whether she was doing that hybrid work, or whether she was having work that was more traditional, and all in that space, because burnout is very real, and we've definitely seen burnout at this particular time as well. And we do have our other guest, Danielle Levy, who will be joining us for this hour and an hour and a half conversation as well. So we're going to be finding out both from these amazing ladies some of the things that they've got going on. And of course, we're looking forward to this robust hour and a half conversation, and all in that space. So I'm going to bring in Ola first and learn more about what she's got going on. And then, of course, I'm going to bring in Danielle as well. But Ola, I know you've got some amazing things that are going on in your life. I did mention that you have dealt with various things with burnout and some of the
Mm.
other things. And I do know that we saw a number of people, even in the gig jobs, that were starting to feel that burnout and starting to feel frustrated, sometimes because they weren't living their true purpose. And sometimes they had to get that gig job in order to just make ends meet. And sometimes that was frustrating them from going into the real work that they wanted to do. And that's just one example of some of the conversation points that I've had with friends and families. But I would love to have you share a little bit about your story. And then later on, I'll be bringing in Danielle as well. And I do know it'll be a fun conversation that we'll be having here at the dinner party, because I always love inviting amazing guests and then finding out their life story and them sharing their life story with our audience. So
Thank
if you
you.
could share a little bit about where you are. I know that you're over there in Europe, even though your family is originally from Nigeria, and you definitely
Yeah.
were earlier talking about some of the travel that you've done. So I'll start with you and definitely hear more of what you've got going on.
Right. Okay. So yeah, my name's Olabumi, and I was born in England. Living in London at the moment, and yeah, it's been a very interesting journey. I can sit down today. Yeah, I'm going to be the big 60 next year, and and just to say, life for me is just beginning. And that's exactly how I feel. That's not something that I'm exaggerating, from, where I've been, what I've experienced, and, the kind of trials and tribulations of life. I must say, I've got a second wind, and life is just amazing. And where I am today is doing the things I love doing, um, from my heart, that's now been able to be a service to people, in a particular area. For instance, I'm a recovery coach for alcohol, food addiction coach as well. People suffering from burnout. I've been able to help all those people purely from my own experience, and how I dealt with it and coped with it and managed, and the support that I got. So for me, it's just an absolute honor and a privilege, really, to be doing these things today.
No, that
And
makes Go ahead. I was going to say that makes a lot of sense, but I know one thing that you talk about, even on your presentations and some of the things that I've been reading about you, is something that I know a lot of folks are guilty of. I know I've been guilty of it in cases, sometimes even in going for jobs and definitely in relationships. So I was wondering if you could speak to a little bit about even the addiction and how we oftentimes do self sabotage ourselves. Because I do know that sometimes we know what is good for us and even what's good for our health. And I know that you've even talked about both the self sabotage and the playing that Russian roulette. And I don't know that I've gone that far, but I've definitely self sabotaged some things,
yeah,
including even in relationships.
yeah. I think with I know we're living this kind of chaotic, life. Life is stressful,
Mhm.
and if you haven't got your boundaries, haven't got a routine, haven't got that discipline, then it can easily rule you. Stress and chronic stress, and from a quite a young age, I was somebody that wanted to achieve. And it was something that was education was very important in a family. From a Nigerian family, we're very strict on education. I used to come home and you go, Dad, I got myself 90%, and it was literally, what happened to the other 10%. And that was how I grew up, super achieving, high achieving. But that came with, for me, a lot of pressure, and it was a lot of pressure to please other people, for people to go, oh, she's done well, hasn't she done well? And I put an awful lot of pressure on myself from a very, very young age. um and even if I got the 90%, even I didn't feel good enough. So I was always in that state of that hole in the soul, trying to fill it with something that was going to make me feel better. So I'd go and achieve, do well. I still didn't feel happy. And I remember at the age of sort of 12, this was just the very, very start of it. My parents aren't big drinkers. They don't drink, only Christmas, birthdays, special occasions. And I was offered a little glass of wine at Christmas. And I immediately felt this is it. From a 12-year-old perspective, and it was just literally the clouds cleared, the sun came out. I just felt wonderful. I felt confident, and for me, ever since that time, it was my best friend. It was something that would solve for a very long period of time, solve so many problems. In the end, it didn't. In the end, it was not my best friend, it was my enemy. And that was the time when I kind of lost control and couldn't stop. And that was the self-sabotage. And I didn't know it was an addiction. I just thought it was, something that I needed every so often, until it got to the point where it was just completely out of control and I couldn't stop. I was completely and utterly powerless. But I would minimize and I'll go, next time, I'll be all right. Even though I'd maybe blacked out or fell asleep or, did something crazy. And I would sober up and go, next time, it's going to be all right. Next time, I'll be fine. I'll be able to control it next time. That is the power of addiction. That's the power of self-sabotage. You think, yeah, you're going to be okay. So that's when I talked about Russian roulette, because I never knew what was going to happen really the next time. Would I get away with it? Would people still be speaking to me the next morning? If I said something awful. And it just got to the point where literally I talk about fall down 7, stand up 8, where this is the power of addiction. This is the power of the control of it over you. That 7 times I went into rehab over 7 years. And then the 8th time I finally got it. And this is how destructive it can be. And, my life completely fell apart. I was served divorce papers from my husband. There was a custody battle of the children. I had a DUI. Everything just went. My profession, was gunning for me. It was just horrendous. And that is how far it took me. This is somebody who is intelligent, who, wanted to get her life together and just couldn't, just couldn't. And even every single time I thought I could do it my way. And let me do it my way. I'm intelligent, I don't need to listen to anybody else. And every single time I ended up in trouble. So for me, this was back in 2008, and I call it my annus horribilis. It was the most awful year. And that was the last time I had my drink. That was the last time I had a drink. And I'm 15 years sober today. And very, very happy with it. Yeah, 15 years. So really happy. Woohoo. But it took me to my knees. It absolutely took me to my knees.
Yeah, wow. And I know one of the other things that you mentioned, and I'm going to bring in Danielle as well, is making those right connections and having those right people in your life and all in that space. And I was just wondering, how important was that to you, and how much did that lead into your own conversation and all in that space? So definitely looking forward to hearing some of Danielle's thoughts around this as well, because definitely I know that some of the things she talks about is having that right connection and making those right connections with folks. So as I bring Danielle in, I was wondering if you could share some of your thoughts as well.
Oh, I think that was vital. That was the number one. I always say, stick with the winners, stick with the people who, have got well, stick with the people who, have your back and are real, don't enable you. That is number one important, having your circle of support, having that support system, your buddy system, where you can connect in, every single day. So it's very important to have people who are, I say stick with the winners, stick with people who, are doing very well, and stick with friends who don't enable you and, are real with you, but will support you. Yeah, it's very, very important. And even right to this today, I have my tribe of people who, we have each other's back.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a lot of things that folks need to have those tribes, and those tribes are very much important. I hear a lot of people talking about find your tribe. And I was wondering, at what point did you find that tribe in your own life, and how successful have you been in doing that, and how has that worked for you as well? Because I hear a number of people that will talk about finding your tribe and learning from your tribe.
It took me quite a long time, because I was very, very much from a background where you don't trust people, you don't tell people your business. You appear strong, especially within the Black community, as a really a Black family in a white neighborhood. It was very much, mind your business. They don't tell your business, all of this. So I never really kind of reached out or, really talked about myself. For many years, I was very, 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 very closed. So for me, it was very difficult to be vulnerable, and to actually speak my truth. It just it didn't even factor. I wouldn't do it because I was scared. I had to appear this strong person. And it was only until 2008 when I thought, I can't do it. This is when I started to get vulnerable. This is when I started, over the period of 2008 to now, really finding people who I resonated with, people who I could open up to and I could trust. And it's not a large tribe, but it's a tribe of people today I'm very, very, very connected with, very strong, and it's vice versa. So this has really been, I suppose, my kind of, support cushion. And everybody needs that. Everybody needs that, whether it's from friends or family or even completely outside in an organization. You need that support.
Yeah, definitely. And I know one of the things you have to have is that support of those folks that are your influencers. And I know there are a number of influencers in my own life. Some of those included some of the folks I was talking to you backstage about, including both of my parents who are still living, but also some folks that have moved on that might have been in the arts, or in one case, they were a major architect and all in that kind of space. But I was just wondering, who were some of the folks that influenced you, and what was the ways that they impacted you?
The people who've influenced me are my holistic tribe. So when I, as I said, came into proper recovery in 2008, I really wanted to look at the holistic way of getting better. I didn't want to take medication. This is what happened. Sort of came into recovery. It was suggested by my doctor, my physician, to take Prozac because of depression. It wasn't depression really. It was just to keep me on the level. And I just knew deep down that I wouldn't get off it. And I spoke to a friend of mine and I said, look, I don't want to go on Prozac. They want me to go. And he said, look, speak to this friend of mine. She's really good. She's a shaman. I've never heard of a shaman before. I'm part of the medical profession, and all of that didn't feel right. And I said, well, let me think about it. Probably a couple of weeks later, I said, look, I'm going to try this lady. I kept an open mind. I was open and willing to try and see, what it was about. And it was the most wonderful session. And that was the start of my true recovery. Was seeing this woman who, I don't know what she did at the time, because I was lying on her couch and she was doing all her shaman bits. But I walked out of that session feeling, and it was the weirdest feeling, and I'd never felt it before, that whatever happens, and I was going through court DUI, I was going through professional bodies, I was going through divorce, and I walked out of the door feeling, I'm going to be all right. Whatever happens, I'm going to be okay. I feel okay. And that was something I'd never felt before, and it felt wonderful. So I did go back to see Anna. She's friends. We're good friends today. She's part of my tribe. And I went back and I wanted to learn more. I was very hungry about it because I'd never had this feeling, and I was still feeling this feeling. It's like, whatever happens, whatever curveball, I'm going to stay in recovery. I'm going to stay well. And then from then I started to learn about the holistic side of life, about things like crystals and Reiki and all of that. And I started to study all that. I was greedy. That was just something I just wanted to know more and more of. And, I just got more and more, I would say, I don't know, I just felt very well despite what was going on. And this is what was interesting. Despite what was going on in my life, I was feeling all right. I had that kind of inner strength. There was something just helping me. And, I would say thank you, to higher powers that, things started to turn out, very, very well. Professionally fine. The divorce went through. It was, it wasn't great, but again, I went through with, yeah, dignity, integrity. I could understand where he was coming from. I could forgive myself. Now, a lot of the time I would have, many people said, how did you manage? How come you didn't have a drink or turn to food or turn to whatever? And I said, I just knew I was going to be okay. I just kept working at it. And that was the thing that I said, whatever I do, my recovery comes first. That comes first. Then let's see what happens. Let the chips fall where they need to fall, but I'm going to be okay.
Yeah, that makes a
And it
lot of
was
sense.
that absolute belief and faith that I'm going to be fine. And it just grew stronger and stronger. And, I developed so many holistic practices for myself, trial and error, certain things. But all in all, I've always said to myself and to my clients, whatever, if you're going to go into recovery, you're going to have to feel really good. This has got to be good. This is worth going into recovery for, feeling joyful, feeling grateful. That's something I practice every day. Gratitude, being able to reach out and help other people. But just that feeling that, yeah, it's great. So,
That makes a lot of
that's how
sense.
it does. And that's where my tribe developed. So I seem to attract that particular kind of, vibration of people. So, I've just got a lovely, lovely, family, beautiful friends. And that's what, we keep each other going.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Danielle, I know that you've been listening and everything along those lines, and I know one of the things that you oftentimes talk about is the hustle, and I had mentioned that earlier in the show and everything, the hustle and bustle. And we do know that during the pandemic, a lot of people were hustling and bustling and trying to make ends meet while also trying to deal with what we were going through during the heart of the pandemic and all along those lines. But I was interested when I read that one of the things that you talk about is how hustling can be both a good and a bad thing when we're thinking about that in business. And as I alluded to earlier, I do have some friends that have their big goals of things that they want to be involved in, whether that's things in the art or whether that's things in the business world. But they sometimes find that they have to do the side hustles, and the side hustles can sometimes be a good part of the job, but it can also take you away from your own mission. And I've also had some conversations with some friends that feel that they are living other people's dreams, meaning that they are getting into the dreams and they are hearing other people's dreams and their ambitions and not necessarily living their own ambition. So he's kind of like you have a friend that say wants to start a restaurant. I'm just using a restaurant as an example. He tells you all about the restaurant, and then you find yourself going into the restaurant space when that isn't necessarily your space. Maybe you want to start a cookie shop, or I'm just using that as an example of a hypothetical and all in that space. So I just wanted your thoughts around that, because we do know folks that are living other people's dreams and also being diverted by the side hustles as well.
Yeah, I think I would agree with everything that you just said about hustling and side hustles. I think there's a certain life circumstance that we're all in that we can't all, just sort of pick up and say, like, I'm going to do this new thing because it's what I'm passionate about. Like, in the reality of life, that may or may not pay the bills, right? So certainly I understand the need to sort of develop hobbies or small businesses and nurture them and grow them and be a responsible, adult and do what we need to do. But also there's that, burning inside of us to get where we want to get to. I also, as someone that I am very much someone that believes that it is, the 10,000 steps that gets us somewhere where we need to be, and to continue to be in movement towards that goal. So, my husband would tell you that I will die trying to get to whatever the end objective is. So I understand the hustle mentality and doing all the things to make it work. I also understand that at a certain point, it becomes detrimental to us when we're so used to hustling and so used to juggling and taking those small steps. It's also just as important sometimes to pause and say, what's the bigger picture here? Like, all of these small steps are great, but what we're actually doing is just burning ourselves out. And when do we actually just need to pause and reset? And I think it's a very fine line between what's a safe hustle and a very comfortable hustle as opposed to what is a toxic hustle, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot
And
of
that's
sense.
something that only, an individual can determine.
No, and along those same lines, and I'd love to hear both of your thoughts around this. I oftentimes hear people talk about entrepreneurs. I know I can be guilty of it as well, that there is not really a 40-hour work week for most entrepreneurs and most people that are trying to do things in the business world. But you do need to take time out in your life to, go out and smell the roses, if I can use that old cliche,
Yeah.
or just to watch the birds and watch some of the other things in that space. But oftentimes when you hear, whether it's on Clubhouse or whether it's in a podcast or just other various other spaces, a lot of these entrepreneurs will tell you that they are working many hours of the day, sometimes 80 to 100 to even 120 hours. And I'm sometimes wonder, where is that work-life balance if you're working that much time and everything? And I think both of you have mentioned being involved in relationships, and in one case it didn't work, but maybe there's a new person in the life, and it sounds like you, Danielle, are still very attached to your husband and family, and both of you seem to be attached to the kids and all of that. But how do you do that balance and act? I'm fortunate that, or unfortunate, depending on the point of view, that I haven't had any kids, but I do have my two nephews that I adore dearly and everything, and definitely have my younger brother and some cousins and other family members, and I'm fortunate to have both of my parents live in their early 80s and everything. But it still has to, I take time out to call those folks, and when on a regular basis, call mom pretty much on almost a daily basis, but at least every other day, and even check in with my aunts that are still living, and definitely check in regularly with my dad and my younger brother. But I don't know that everybody does that in the business community. So I was wanting to hear both of your thoughts about the work-life balance and how it can work if you're trying to be an entrepreneur. Either one.
Yeah, sure. So, I chose to have children, and am lucky enough to have them, and I think they have really forced the situation for me. There's a fluidity in my life that still, my kids are older, they're high school age, but there's still a certain amount of parenting that happens where, like they're both ice hockey players, right? So it's very common for me to be working on a Friday night, like, and people know, oh, Danielle's boys are at the ice rink again, because like it's Friday night at 6 p.m. and she's, getting in a couple of hours of work, right? Like that's how disciplined I need to be with it. At the same time, when there's something that's happening at school, like business stops and I switch into mom mode. So I would actually say, as a mom and as a professional, even though maybe I have some more formal responsibilities than folks that don't have children, it actually makes the balancing of it very clear to me about how I need to be spending my time and what my priorities are. So I'm very lucky that the decisions are just sort of made for me.
Yeah, was want to hear Ola's answer, but before I get to Ola's answer and everything, I was wondering, Danielle, can we get your kids down to the Carolina Hurricanes, since I am down here in the Carolinas, and we can always use good hockey players down here, since we didn't always have a hockey team, but we do have one that we've had now for, I think, about a couple of decades, and all in that space. And they've had a little bit of luck, even though I don't know that they'll win the Stanley Cup this year, but who knows? And maybe we can recruit your kids for next year or something along those lines.
Probably not. They're Boston sports fans, so I think it'd be pretty hard pressed to get them out of the area here.
Understood. There are people that are playing probably against us for the Boston Bruins and all in that space.
Exactly.
Ola, what is your take on the whole notion of balance? And like I said, you definitely went through that partially with the divorce, but you do have the kids of your own, and I'm sure that you have had to balance life with them, even though I'm sure that they're probably older kids as well.
Well, I did go through the burnout. So it was the big burnout 2008. And then as we talked about alcohol, we talked about food, everything to try and compensate and, keep going. And then it was a complete, utter stop. That was, I just couldn't function anymore. And that is burnout. I wrote a book about it in 2013, that, it is literally, it's something kind of go, burnout is just like exhaustion. No, you just completely stop. Your adrenal glands are completely fatigued. You have nothing left in the tank. And so coming into, and again, I was, with my medical profession, I had 2 young children. all that, and people pleasing, no boundaries. That was my problem, and trying to do more. And again, filling that kind of hole in the soul. I'm not enough, so I need to do more. That was what that was my MO until 2008. Coming into recovery, balance was very important. Stress management was very important. Everybody's different. Some people thrive off it, really, really thrive off it and love the 80, 100 hours. That would kill me. But I knew that I had a family. I knew that was important. Number one, my recovery was important. My family was important. My profession was important. But then I sort of realized that there was things I wanted to do, other things like Daniel was talking about, the hobbies that I gained from, my sessions with Anna. So for instance, using crystals and Reiki and all those things started to come into play. But I had to have kind of compartmentalize really and have a lot of me time. And I actually found I was a lot more productive having time out, as Daniel was talking about, is sometimes you just got to stop, and see what you're doing. It's all right scrambling and being on this treadmill and I've got to achieve this and I've got to do that. But you've got to every so often stop and just assess and just take a step back and think, am I going in the right direction? Is this what I'm doing? Is this productive? These 10,000 steps you're talking about, is it productive or do I need to tweak it? And I always think about, my resources, my energy and time, and looking at that and have I got enough energy for this? Have I got enough time for this? And if I haven't, then I kind of set that aside. So I park things that really are just not really enhancing my life and really focus on, one thing at a time. At the moment, I have, two businesses, and I'm still in my profession. But I have the time to focus completely on one. Everything stops, do not disturb, the phone goes off, everything goes off, and I will do probably 5 hours work and do it properly rather than spend the whole day. So really focus, really, really channel and get that work done. Because I do believe that I need that time out, especially when I went through burnout. I do need time to rest. I need time to get my thoughts together. I need time to go for a walk in the sunshine, get that vitamin D. I really do believe you're more creative and more productive when you just take that step back and you do go for that walk or you do meet a friend and that's the way I kind of roll. And for me, it's a lot more productive. But as I said, everybody's different. As Danielle said, everybody's different. But I know that I need to have that balance. So I enjoy everything. And I keep enjoying what I'm doing. Yeah, I enjoy my businesses. I enjoy my boys are at university now. I've sort of got, time to myself in many respects and time to see my friends. Time for everything. If every area of your life is feeling good, then yeah, it's great. It's
that
really
makes a lot of
good.
sense. But you brought up something that I think you and Daniel both kind of alluded to and everything. And I was wondering y'all's thoughts on this. But too often in business and just in life in general, we do find ourselves getting caught in that people pleaser mindset and definitely listening to those outside critics and also those inner critics. So we know that we can be our own worst enemy. And you kind of alluded to that earlier, Ula, and everything. But I was just wondering, I'll start with you, Danielle, how you deal with that people pleasing ability, because I do find it there is that aspect of a business that goes on. And definitely we know that everybody is of the mindset that they know how to run your business better than you know how to run your business. So there is a lot of critics that are there. And I think we can definitely get good advice from them, but sometimes those critics don't even have knowledge in the business that you are working in. So just wondering your thoughts about listening to those critics that can sometimes be toxic critics.
Yeah. If there was a course in school about people pleasing, I would have gotten in an A+ and been in the honors program and everything else. I would say personally that I had to go through the course of burnout and a lot of tears and frustration and anger to really just come to terms with the fact that I needed to put up boundaries and be more forward in my capacity And when I set the expectations as such, I could still feel as if I was, following through on my word and being the people pleaser that I wanted to be, but that no one was going to take care of me at the end of it unless I did. And that is easier said than done, but I'm glad I learned the lesson.
Yeah, and I definitely understand that, and that is a valuable lesson. Definitely want to hear from Ola her thoughts around those, hearing those critics, and sometimes those outside critics can be wonderful and all of that. But as I was looking, particularly at your notes, Daniel, because this question has been lingering on my mind as I was looking at some of the things that are on some of the topics that you deal with and everything. And there's two things that I've got to ask you about, and then we'll get to some of these other topics as well. But you asked a question as to why skyscrapers aren't built with duct tape. And I'm going like, what exactly does she mean by that? And then the other one I know that you talk a lot about is businesses that don't have an ICE plan, which is in the case of emergency plan. I think a lot of businesses don't have a business plan, but that's just my personal opinion, because I think a lot of people are of the opinion that they can go into business. And I think that you need a business plan just in general. I have a very dear friend of mine that has a conversation about promoters, meaning entertainment promoters, because he used to be the rental coordinator at the theater, at one of our theaters here in the area. And he used to tell me that everybody's a promoter until it's time to actually pay the check, meaning that everybody will come up with all these great ideas of what they need to do and how they need to do it and all in that space. But then it would be after they had to actually write the check, that's when you found out who was the real promoters and who wasn't. Just folks that were giving it lip service, that had a dream or an ambition, but didn't have a business plan or a plan of action behind what they wanted to do, whether that was bringing a play to the venue or whether that was bringing a musical concert, because there were a lot of people that had visions of grandeur but didn't have the money to back it. I'll just put it that way and everything. So I was wondering, and I found that in a number of businesses, folks that don't have any sense of a business plan of what they are doing. But I was just wondering, is it that they need both a good business plan and an in case of emergency plan, or are these two separate plans, or is the in case of emergency plan in the business plan?
I would say that they're two different plans. I mean, I think I work with a lot of small businesses, and the last I have witnessed it, that the CEO steps away from the business, or you're in the middle of a critical event or something like that, and something goes wrong. And the idea with these businesses is to grow them into a legacy organization rather than just a high-paying salary, right? And in order to do that, your team or your right hand or whatever your trusted circle is needs to know how to respond in a variety of situations. So I would argue that every business needs a business plan and an ICE plan, but I would also argue that every household also needs an ICE plan, right? I always tell my husband there's equal chance I'm going to get hit by that proverbial bus as there is that I'm running away on my dream vacation. And you better know where all the bank accounts are and how to get the kids to their doctor's appointments and all of that sort of stuff. So it's the same thing in a business. I had a CEO who had stepped away, and something happened with her website. And it was like we had to track her down on our holiday and figure out who this provider was and that provider was. And she was doing just as much scrambling, and she lost quite a bit of business that day, simply because she hadn't slowed down to create the blueprints that would stand up her business.
Isn't it harder to create a blueprint these days? Because I know a lot of people in a lot of societies, we've had a lot of shows here on the network, Pride TV, that have talked about it even, that are very much fans of generational education and generational wealth. But I don't know, unfortunately, that enough people are excited about the businesses that their parents are in and everything. So even though we oftentimes say that we want generational wealth and generational businesses, I do know a number of businesses that have failed or that are no longer around because after the person that was the founding person, or maybe one or two generations later, left, then there was the other generations that were coming next. They were like, nah, I don't want to be in the newspaper field. And that's just one example, or don't want to be in the insurance field. And so those businesses have kind of gone by the wayside. Some of it is because of the change of the nature of society, because certain medias and certain things were more popular back then than they were now. But I don't know that you're going to pass a milkman's job down, because I don't even know if there are milkmen even out there anymore in that space. But I was just wondering, how easy is it to have these generational handed down jobs? So I guess that's more of a question for you, Daniel, because I know that's kind of your lane, because that's one of the conversations that I have with friends of mine that are frustrated that they can't seem to get their kids into the business that they created.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can tell you firsthand that my dad was incredibly disappointed that I didn't want to take over his dental practice, right? Like, I'm not a dentist. I don't want to polish people's teeth. It was devastating to him, but it wasn't going to happen, right? So I think it's more about, I think what you're referring to is legacy planning.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I think whatever that may be in a situation, I think the planning has to happen. So I don't think any CEO, what was I reading about recently? I'm probably getting my articles crossed, but I have a feeling it was like Disney or one of those big companies. Like, they had been priming this executive for years and years and years to take over the CEO spot. And don't quote me on the company. And then all of a sudden, that person that they had been priming up and went to a competitor, right? So every business needs to be thinking about, like, who is going to hold these reins, whether it's my dad, the local dentist, or whether it's a massive executive. There has to be a certain amount of legacy planning that happens. And there's no guarantees, whether it's your children or the next generation or whatever it might be, or whether it's someone that's been trained in the business for years and years and years. There needs to be a plan for how that business is going to go on.
No, I definitely agree with you. And this is for both of you. And I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on this. There is a lot of times people think of leaders, and they think of leaders as being these great extroverts. And I consider myself to be an introvert extrovert, because there are times I can be very much to myself and all in that space, and be very comfortable being to myself and all along those lines. And then I can go out into the public and do a number of public events. I've definitely done some MCing and some other things that are very public, and can enjoy that kind of encounter as well. But I am, as a friend of mine called me earlier today, a rare breed in that sense. There's not all that many introvert extroverts in my mind and everything, but I think a lot of people are of the stereotype that a leader needs to be an extrovert. But I know, Danielle, you consider yourself an introvert. I think I'm hearing some things within Ula that she may be an introvert as well. So how important is it to understand those characteristics of yourself, and can you be a leader and be one that is very much comfortable within your own space and not necessarily need to be out in the public all the time?
Yeah, I completely agree that you can. I think you can be both. I am an introvert by nature, but there is a part of me that I've cultivated that I can, go out. And this is kind of knowing yourself, getting to know yourself, getting to know your strengths, your weaknesses, and being very clear. And being, as Danielle talked about, having a plan, and having a plan of, what you share, what you don't, what you can, delegate, how you can be a leader. And a leader isn't always necessarily, it could be leading from a holistic point, how that person is, how you're, with kind of emotional intelligence. And I think, once you've got those skills, it's just so much easier to go out and, lead in many respects. I lead kind of by example. I lead through coaching. I'm a guide. I'm a mentor. So that's where I come from. But I think you can have both. I think you can be an introvert and an extrovert at times. But I do know that I need a lot of time for myself, to recharge and regroup. That's very important to me. And for instance, we talk about human design. I'm a projector. There's different human designs. I'm a projector, which means I need a lot of time out. And I'm actually a lot more productive when I do that, when I can step back, then I can come back into the arena with all guns blazing, creative ideas, get work done. But I do need that energy, needs to be protected. It's very, very precious. And certain environments can be a bit of an energy suck. So I'm very, very mindful of my time. I'm very mindful of my energy. I'm very mindful of lots of boundaries. No is a complete sentence as well. And I exercise all of that. And it's sometimes I want to go in and kind of let's go for it. but a lot of the time now I can take a step back and really, create some good stuff, and then have that inspired action rather than just act mindlessly. Is it comes from things I do now come from focus and inspiration.
Yeah. What about you, Danielle? Because, like I said, I know that that's something that you have dealt with, being a leader, but also a self-proclaimed introvert.
Yeah, I think it's about knowing yourself. I think I am the first one to kind of know what my strengths and weaknesses are, I think. And I hire around that. I know what my tendencies are. I know what I coach my clients on, and I know what needs to get done in a business, and I know what I'm personally willing to do and what I would rather have someone else do for me. So, you know, my best work are the items that I enjoy, that I feel comfortable at. When I don't think that I think that holds true whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. You just kind of figure out how to make the puzzle pieces work around you. And I think that's what leadership is how do you show up collectively and make that happen, not whether you're doing it yourself or not.
No, that makes a lot of sense. There are a lot of leaders, and I've worked in some companies, some in the arts, some not in the arts as well, where a certain type of leader likes to impose their will on people and all in that space. And I know that there is the whole notion of the micromanager and the macro manager and all in that space. Specifically for you, Daniel, but I'm sure Ola may have some thoughts around it as well. How do you navigate those conversations in those business lanes? Because some people are very hard set in the way that they want to manage their company, even though it might not be the most productive way to manage their people, depending on the people's styles of of being managed. But I was just wondering if that's something that I know you deal with, Daniel. I'm sure there are companies that you've gone with where the person is trying to put their wheel on the job, whatever that job is, and wants to do. I think that's the macro manager, if I remember correctly. I sometimes get them mixed up in which is the one that is more controlling and which is the one that is less controlling.
Yeah, it's interesting. So when I think about who my clients are the business. Mm-hmm. My clients are not the person that's physically signing my paycheck. And when I've shifted my mindset to really serving the business and what does the business need, it allows me to have really unemotional conversations about the problems that need to be solved, and asking the hard questions of why does it need to be done this way, or what if we did this, or what if we did the other thing, or why is this your style, or whatever it might be. I am certainly not always right. And I think a company's secret sauce is just that. It's what's made them, hopefully so successful. But at the end of the day, if I'm not meshing with the team that I'm working with, I'm actually okay stepping away, because I know that it's come from a place of integrity rather than a personal opinion about how I would do things personally, if that makes sense. And so I think when I'm working with leaders and they're understanding, it's not about this side versus that side. It's about how do we serve the business in the best possible way. Those conversations are pretty easy to have, I think.
If I can change this question, this is definitely for both of you. If you could change something about your job as it is currently, what would that be? So if you could change something about like the everyday way that the job is done, what would you change about your own job? Because a lot of people may get some insights into your own leadership thoughts about that particular question.
I can take that question. It's, I sit in this really tricky spot where my job is to allow those people that I work with to do their best jobs and let me worry about some of the other problems. Right. I had an emergency call from a client a couple of days ago, and she was just petrified. What had I been doing? What was going on with these projects? Why hadn't she heard from me in 36 hours? Like this, the sky was falling. And I took her through the spreadsheets that I had created and the processes that I had created and the steps that I was taking. And by the end of the call, she was crying. And I thought, oh gosh, now I've really done it. And she had so much joy for the work that was happening that she couldn't believe that she didn't need to be involved in it and that her business was happening. But in those days between when she made that panic call to me and when we had actually had the conversation, she was riddled with anxiety about like the sky is falling. And I appreciate the flexibility that I don't go into an office every day, but I wish there was more transparency, or I could figure out a way to create that transparency to people know that I've got their back and here's what I'm doing. And, you know, if you don't hear from me, it's because I'm doing this stuff instead of communicating that I'm doing the stuff. Right. And so I have always tried to be really mindful of what am I communicating? How is the client feeling? But there always just seems to be that little bit of friction or breakdown in that exists. And I feel like I'm constantly having to challenge how do I make people feel more supported?
Because the reason I was smiling and smirking a little bit is there's an expression that exists in a lot of businesses, and I've heard it definitely in some of the consulting work that I have done as well. It's more in media and social media consulting, but in some other kind of even podcasting consulting, and it is the notion that your fire is not necessarily my emergency, because I do think that there are some people that are automatically willing to think that, you know, because it is a problem to them that you are supposed to jump and everything. And it's not always the case, but I don't know if you want to address that or if even Ola wants to take it. But I do know that that is a common thing where people will try to give you anxiety because it is an emergency or a crisis that they are having, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a crisis in what your part of what their job is, because like I said, it might even be a crisis that has nothing to do with the job whatsoever.
I think speaking from my own perspective and, you know, with my own businesses, I don't go into organizations. I deal with individuals and coaching and etc. But I liked what Danielle said, which was, you know, being in the business and being on the business. And that was something that I learned from a very, very kind of early stage of my business with a business coach, is that do you want to be in it or on it? And for me, it's being on it, which means having my tribe who have got their superpowers, the stuff that I absolutely have no intention of doing because I'm just not interested, you know, and being able to hone my, you know, my superpower, which is, you know, coaching clients and, you know, doing the holistic work and doing all of that. And for me, that's been the difference between, firefighting and kind of losing sight of stuff. You know, you're at that point in your career or your profession or your business where you can kind of pop above the parapet and see what's going on, because you've got the right people, which has taken trial and error, but you've got the right people in your team that do all the right things. They don't necessarily, as Danielle said, you know, report to me every single day. I don't want them to, you know. They've got that, you know, proficient at what they do, that I know they're doing their job. And that kind of is really lovely feeling that, you know, 2 or 3 days later, all the work that's been assigned has been done, you know, it's put in place, and, you know, I can get on with what I have to do. So all the cogs are working, you know, in synchronicity. And that's fantastic. So it's about getting that perspective of, you know, what are you doing it for? You know, and how joyful is it? Are you enjoying it? If not, then just take a step back and have a look at what you're doing. And it's not to your detriment if you do just take that time out and just reassess and reevaluate, you know, what your business is, what you are doing, redo that business plan. You know, it's all very important.
No doubt about that. How important is it for both of you to have a mentor who's been in your life, and how have they helped drive your careers and all in that spaces? Because I definitely know that in my own life, both of my parents are mentors, but there are also friends and acquaintances that are in similar fields that I consider mentors as well. But I was just wondering, how important has the mentorship been in the successes that you have both become? Start with Danielle and then go to Ola.
For me, it's been everything. It's been that grounding point when everything else just feels like a whirlpool of activity. It's the person that challenges me and keeps me honest and really focused on what that North Star is. And I think they're hard. A good mentor is really hard to find. But when you do, you don't let go.
Who are some of the mentors as well?
I'm sorry, we had a cutout. Could you repeat that?
I said, who are the personal mentors in your own life? And then I want to hear from Ola as well. But who are some of your own personal mentors?
Yeah, you know, they've all been women. You know, I can remember one of my earliest mentors was I was working. This is cut me off if my story gets too long, but I was working in an ad agency, which was filled with, it was much like the TV show Mad Men. And there was plenty of gentlemen in suits and closed door meetings and, you know, all the things. And there was a woman brought in, her name was Jenny. I'll never forget her. And in this very formal advertising agency, she always wore a white t-shirt, a pair of jeans, and a pair of Keds sneakers. We worked in one of the biggest skyscrapers in Boston, and the elevators were not fast enough for her because of the volume of work that needed to get done. So I remember just running up and down the flights of stairs with her. And then, you know, it was the first time that I saw anyone, never mind that she was, you know, a blonde hair, blue eyed woman, you know, go into executive meetings when there were, you know, things that needed to be signed off on, or, you know, real emergencies, real in the corporate sense, emergencies that needed to be addressed. And that in spite of the jeans and the white t-shirt and the Ked sneakers, knew how to command that room of executives to get their attention, to get the decisions made. And she wasn't afraid to be running the hallways in her sneakers, to move faster, to do more. And I'll never, ever forget seeing that, like not judging what people are wearing or what you perceive them to be because they have a certain color hair or certain color eyes or whatever it is. It's how you show up in the room and how you command those conversations and gain the respect of your peers. It was really incredible.
Sounds like she was an amazing mentor. It's definitely still resonating with you even to this day. So, Ulla, are there some mentors that you had as well, and who are some of those mentors?
I've had several mentors along the kind of the last few years, but I think for me it was like mindset. I had a mindset coaches, spiritual mentors, you know, because I just believe my business is an extension of me, you know, so all that has to be grounded. So very much more the spiritual side of my business. You know, if my spirit's good, my business is good. You know, we're the energies are the same. So he's really working on the spiritual side of it, the mindset side of it, the belief work, the belief in yourself. Because very much, you know, I sort of came into this second phase of my life where really low self-esteem, even though I'd achieved loads, it was still there. There was still, I'm not good enough. You know, I'm not intelligent enough. I'm not this enough. So, you know, this hole in the soul had to be filled with the right stuff. And, you know, just growing that sense of self-worth and self-belief has really, you know, skyrocketed everything else around me, relationships, business, the whole lot. So, yeah, sort of my mentors are my more spiritual mentors.
Yeah, it makes sense. And that spirituality is important. I know that a lot of people are always trying to figure out ways that they can have that balance and everything. And I was wondering how important in both of your lives is it to have the balance of good health, a good faith walk, a good emotional connection, and the good mental connection. Because I do know that we are all have all of those elements of us, and some may have some other elements, but definitely their core is our mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health. So I'll start with you, Danielle. How important is it for you to have that balance in the life of all of those working together?
It's so crucial for me. You know, I wouldn't consider myself like a health nut by any means, but what I can tell you that my energy levels are directly based on, you know, what I've eaten the previous day or how much sleep I've gotten, or you know, if I've gotten outside, you know, to go for a walk or whatever it is. And it took me later into my adult years to figure out those connections. But it's amazing the power and the creativity and the energy that I have when those things are in alignment for me.
Agreed. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah,
Yeah, super,
definitely.
super important.
Yeah,
Super important.
yeah, you got to have that alignment. There's no doubt that alignment is very important. I said, I alluded to it earlier, but I still got to get to it because, like I said, when I was looking at the notes that I had for you and everything, Danielle, I still haven't figured out why skyscrapers aren't built with duct tape, but I do love that quote. So definitely, I'd love to hear your explanation around that because I'm thinking it probably has to be that they would probably fall apart and fall down if they were built with duct tape. But I do know that's something that you even talk about is why skyscrapers are not built with duct tape. So I'm sure our listeners are going like, what's he talking about? Duct tape and skyscrapers. So if you could allude to some of that, I'm sure our listeners would love to hear that.
Yeah, no, you've got it exactly right. Just this idea of building a solid foundation. Like you just touched on, it's health, it's wellness, it's physical, it's mental. In business, it's legacy planning, like we've touched on. It's having that ICE plan in place. What you don't want to do is depend on the duct tape, right? If like you really need that solid foundation, and you want like the best glue possible, or whatever is stronger than glue. I guess maybe that's like super glue or cement or whatever it might be, right? Right, as you're building up in your business and your personal life, because I think most people are like, we like to control. I like to control my destiny. I like knowing that my efforts are going somewhere and that I'm producing something that's sustainable. And duct taping things together for a quick fix, in my opinion, is not the way to do it.
Yeah, definitely. That's not
Agreed.
the way to do it. And like I said earlier, too often people are living their own dreams. They're living the dreams of their or living the dreams of others. And caught up in that because they will try to tell you that you need to be living their dream, and a lot of times you got to give your own dream. So that's a lesson that I've had to learn and still continue to learn even to this day and everything. But that being said, what are some of the life lessons that you wish you had learned when you were younger, but if you could go back, you would have told that 21-year-old self or even that 50-year-old self that this is what they were facing and everything? Because both of you have had interesting lives and all in that space. So in this case, I'll start with you, Ola, and then hear from you, Danielle. What is something that you would go back and warn your younger self about?
Follow your heart. I think that's my number one is, follow your heart, be true to yourself, and listen. Listen to what you really want. And a lot of the time I was very pulled. As I said, with people pleasing and making sure my decisions they weren't my decisions. Like for instance, my profession. I was told what to do, and you go and do it. So I did it, and so it was very much doing what other people wanted, putting other people's wants and needs first and putting mine last. And it's my older self to younger self would say, put yourself first from the get-go. Whatever you want to do is right for you, you're aligned with you. Just do it. Just follow your own heart.
What would you tell your younger self that would be a warning or a lesson that you wish you had learned back then that you would tell them to deal with?
I think there are two things. One is slow down. It's not about the hustle. And two, I took many next steps because I thought they were the ones that I was supposed to, not the ones that I wanted. And there's a difference there. And I think if I had slowed down and realized that I didn't have to do the thing that I thought I was supposed to, and that I could pave my own path, I think that would have been great.
Yep. How concerned are both of you? Because it's come up in our news shows, and we have some news shows as well as some of the other interview shows. And both of you are mothers, and I recently read a recent study where a lot of folks are concerned that the world of their kids will not be as good as the world that they lived in, and even the world that their grandparents and great grandparents lived in. So, as mothers and as parents, how concerned are you about what the world will look like, say, 20, 30 years from now? And what are your own thoughts as to what it will look like? Because I know a lot of people are saying we're going from the, um, kind of the industrial age. We went from agricultural to industrial, and some people are saying we're going from industrial to knowledge or technology kind of stuff to this day. And there are some people that are wondering about what that will look like for the job market. So I guess I'll start with you, Danielle, because it's definitely impacting the job market. But I would love to hear from Ola as well. But what do you think of the world will look like, and are you concerned about the future for your kids?
I don't think I can't even begin to process what the world will look like. That's much too big and too daunting for me. And that's not ignorance. That's like, what can I control? What can I do? I can't even I can't even process that. What I can say that as a mom is I have every confidence in my children that they will live their best lives that they create for themselves. And, certainly, life is hard. And I experienced that at a very, very young age. And it breaks my heart to think that they will have those heartbreaks as well. I know it's life. I wish it wasn't that way. But I have amazing kids that with whatever they choose to do, it will be great for them. And that's all I can do is focus on supporting them in that way.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Everything. What about you, Ola? What is your hope for your college age children? And what are you?
Yeah, college age. Again, I don't know what's going to happen in the next 20 years, 30 years. We have so many different projections about the environment, about the population. Now there's going to be population decrease, dramatic. This is what we hear now. That there's going to be an older generation with a slowly depleting younger generation looking after the older generation. You're hearing all these things. And I know that over time, over, the centuries, we've always pivoted, we've always survived. We've always had, every single generation will have its woes. Everyone in my generation, our generation has had its woes. My parents' generation has had its woes. That's life. And it's living life on life's terms. But I know that I've prepared my children, my boys, the best way possible. And they really are a generation of, they're more free-flowing thinkers. They're not the kind of your 9 to 5 going to work 9 to 5 generation. They're your entrepreneurs. They're the digital nomads. My boys are kind of, one's in Madrid at the moment, hanging out for a month with his university pal, and he's got his own business. They are very, very fluid. They're creators as well as survivors. They see what's going on, and they know they have to pivot, and they switch, and they're a lot more free thinking, a lot more relaxed. Hey, mom, just relax. It's not that deep. I always hear. So it's just a different generation, and I don't know. I think whatever. As I said to you early on, when I came into recovery, I just knew everything was going to be okay. Not because there was no curveballs, flying at me. I just knew it was going to be okay. And my boys seem to always have that sense as well. Everything's going to be okay. Whatever happens, it's going to be fine. So I don't see it as doom and gloom as such the next 20, 30 years. I don't feel it's going to be. I think there's going to be a lot of, I think things are going to get worse before they get better. It's like kind of pricking a boil, lancing a boil. This is what's happening at the moment. But I'm just hoping optimistically 20 to 30 years a lot of things will be faced and sorted, and humanity will come to its senses to a certain extent.
Yeah, that's definitely the hope and everything. Because we get ready to wind down, and I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I hope you all have as well. One of the things I was curious about is, what do you consider some of your strongest drawbacks or your strongest failures, and what did you learn from those? So I'll start with you, Ola, but I'd also love to hear from Daniel as well, something that is a failure that you learned from, and what did you learn?
The failures that I learned from was doing things despite my best judgment. Yeah. And again, listening to others and doing something despite my best judgment. And that's where the failures came, wasn't listening to myself. What was the other question?
What you learned from that experience, but yes, that was the lesson.
That was it. Yeah. That was it. Yeah.
That makes sense. What about yourself, Danielle? What do you consider one of your biggest failures, and what did you learn from that experience?
I don't think I've really had any failures. And what I mean by that, it's not that everything has always gone perfectly, but there's nothing that's ever happened in a way that I wish it hadn't, that I haven't learned something from. Like I've become more confident in my decision making, what's more important to me, as I make decisions the next time. Again, it's not that everything's been perfect, but every single thing that's been thrown at me, like there's always that lesson. And I don't know, I just feel like I keep just picking up these bits of knowledge as I go and try not to step into the same trap twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know one thing that you said is that even in business, you've had to deal with personal loss and everything. So how has that impacted the business, and how has that gone? Because I know sometimes that personal loss can even be the loss of a coworker or the loss of a family member. I know that even at the job that I'm going to go to very shortly, two of our members of that job have lost sisters recently. So actually our tech director just recently lost his sister, who was a young sister, and the other one, who does work in the development space and also in our youth program, has lost a sister that had been struggling for a while. So in one case, I think it was somewhat expected. In the other case, it was definitely unexpected, because they were a young person that passed at a very young age. So I was just wondering, how has personal loss impacted your own career, Danielle?
Well, personal loss has impacted my career and my life quite significantly. But I would say as a leader and a professional, I make every effort to meet people where they're at and just understanding their circumstances. Like I've learned, there's a huge difference for some people between an end of day deadline and a start of business deadline, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's like 12 to 15 hours there, that for some people is such, a difference. And so, certainly I think as adults, we have to own our situations, and I'm not looking to give anyone a pity pass, but when you can meet people where they're at, you get a lot better results from them quite often.
That makes sense. That's actually interesting you brought that up, because that's one of the times that I was frustrated at a job. I don't work at that company, even though I do sometimes help at a festival that they are involved with. But a dear friend of mine had passed, and I remember going to the service, and I remember the head, the boss, the person that runs that particular company, literally giving the sister, who also worked at that company, some insurance papers and things along those lines. And I just felt that that was the epitome of tackiness from a business leader and everything. I know that you have to deal with those things even in a business space, but I think there's a time and a place for everything. And I didn't think that that was the time and the place, but that was just my opinion. I think me and others observed that and we're going like, no, you don't need to be doing that now. There's other things that they need to be dealing with, and they could have either dealt with that earlier or dealt with it much later. But that was just my own personal thought when I saw that, and that transpired like some 10 years ago or something along those lines. But as you can see, it still resonates with me, the fact that they did that and all in that space. So I just wondering, do you think that sometimes businesses don't pay enough attention to the nature of what people are going through, whatever that is, whether that's life changing moment or things that are in that space? So I think sometimes businesses don't do enough thought around that part of their planning as well. But Danielle, what are your thoughts?
I could not agree with you more. I hate to give you the short answer, but I think you just nailed it right there.
No, that's fair enough, and that is more than fair enough. So I appreciate that, and appreciate short answers are allowed as well. Like I said, getting ready to wind down. I said one thing that I get everybody to do on the show is tell folks how they can be reached. And I definitely want you both to do that and everything. And also, the Pod TV network is a global network, so we love to have people give their message of positivity and hope to our global listeners. So there might be people listening from India, from Malaysia, from Australia, because I know one of our commentators is definitely in Australia, and a number of other places. So any message of positivity and hope that you want to give, ways that people can reach you, and also any last thoughts that you have as we wind down. So I'll start with you, Ola, since I started with you, and I'll end with Danielle. So Ola, any ways that folks can reach you, websites and things along those lines, positive messages, and any other things that you would like to share?
Well, my positive message is, there's never been a time to live your best life than now. I always think of the power of now, but, not to be despondent or you feel like hopeless, that there's always hope. There's always ways to, unlock that true potential, and live your best life. And, going from limited to limitless is my motto, that you can, with the right, strategies, really, really rock it forward. And people sometimes think, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. What's life going to be like in 5 or 10 years? I don't know. This is where I come in, which is Future Life Progression. And it's a pioneering sort of dynamic tool, which helps you kind of discover, where you're going to be, in your future, the best possible future you. And we don't take enough time sometimes to kind of really vision for ourselves, really, big visions for ourselves, and bring it back to present. And a lot of the time we're kind of stuck in the day to day, and opening up that vision, I think, is very, very powerful. And if you want to contact me and for further information, it's www.yourfuturelife.co.uk, and you can message me and contact me through the website. But I think it's now is a time, it's a powerful year to look beyond what is going on in the outside world and really start to crystallize what you want for yourself.
It makes a lot of sense. Danielle, ways that you can be reached, any messages of positivity and hope that you want to give to folks as well, and definitely any other thoughts that you have about business and other folks that may reach you, and any other messages that you would like to share with our audience as well.
Yeah, sure. So I can be found online at danielleclevy.com. I do my best to return every message. I welcome to hear from folks. And I think the message that I would give people is just to know their North Star, know that it won't be a direct line to get there, but just to stay in motion, big steps, small steps, whatever it takes, you'll get there.
No doubt. Definitely appreciate both of you. And like I said, I'm going to give a message of a friend of a friend that actually talks about the notion of mentors. It's almost like a poetic kind of message that they give to get us on out of here, because there's a gentleman that does a poetic message about the importance of coaching and the importance of mentors and all along those lines. So I do hope to see both of you back on future editions of the Online Dinner Party, as well as some of the other shows that Pod TV does also. So I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation and hope that y'all have enjoyed it as well.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah,
no
thank
problem.
you.
No problem at all.
The difference between thinking and doing and living in the 21st century. They teach us about being a real quarterback-oriented games. We don't have to just use video games and live in the shadows of good things because of them. We grow up with agility far larger and bigger than we are tall. Parents are the champions and have to be our first life coaches and know-it-alls. Who knows how this came to be? Coaches will ask you if you know your right foot from your left, if you know yourself, if you act knowingly good or bad, if you can move and negotiate a field with style and form, if you can tackle or throw a pass, or if your last name is that of a clown. If you can let someone know on the team that you are in trouble before you cause yourself or someone else trouble. If you are ready to learn teamwork or aware that you started out today with your pants down or Your sportsmanship was left on the kitchen table. If you know the social studies, the alphabets, science, music, characters, and the stats and the numbers of a great student player eligible to stay on the team, and if you know the poise of great athletic champions and their scientific attitudes that are historical or music to us now, if you have the swag of the game, the discipline, the performance, and artistic form down pat, and if you have the style of gymnastics that the sport has with life, if you have the work ethic and determination to make it all seem easy and not a game at all, if you have the knowledge of all the above, or you don't know things like this even make the difference, I think that when it comes to the importance of parents and their field and self-knowledge, wisdom, virtues, and courage, their teachings, love, respect, care that they illustrate on the field and in the grind of life with their actions and their ideas, experiences, muscle, and strategic magic and skills wrapped around us with their priceless love. For their verbs to be that make us winners in this hard and fast third century that without them, kids and adults, athletes could hardly see or do anything at all. Parents teach us the difference between playing video games and playing on the field. Parents teach us how to be champions. A huge hug should go to parents, coaches, and parent-like community people who have love on the field for you and who are champions for your life, both in and out the games.